Okay, folks, welcome back. Another Wednesday night for most of us, morning or afternoon for others. Tonight, the subject was or is stop looking, stop searching. I've I get a lot of people who show up either to workshops or for sessions who have been looking for answers in different areas, different ways for a long time, doing all sorts of different processes, following different people, doing different workshops, believing all sorts of stories, and they're just as lost now or confused as they were when they started. There's, I guess, reasons for that, and it's not that anyone's doing anything wrong. It's just, personally, I don't think any of those avenues are very effective at all. At least I haven't found any that are to date. I don't think I ever went looking sort of workshoppy wise, spiritual journey, whatever. I mean, I did have that knowing of interest in the teachings of the Buddha from an early age, but most of my desire for travel, to get away, to escape, was genetics, charge picked up from my father, but also the very uncomfortable childhood I had. I needed to get away. But what I did realize early on in my journeys was that I couldn't discover who I was if I remained in the environment that I was born in, with all of the expectations and conditions placed upon us. And that happens to all of us. Of course, we get caught in that particular trap without necessarily realizing it. But I did recognize it. And so I left the UK for Australia when I was 21. Um, and that was the beginning, really. It took a little while after arriving in Australia to really begin that journey of self-discovery. I was at maybe 18 months or so when I left and went from Sydney up to Darwin in the far north, a bit of a cowboy town it was then. A very different place, but it was a place where anyone could really rewrite themselves. People from all sorts of backgrounds were there, a lot of government workers, of course, but a lot of sort of criminal types as well, shady types, all sorts of people were drawn there because you could rewrite your story there. So that was a very useful place for me, even though I wasn't sort of attending workshops, but this was like, oh, I don't know, over 50 years ago. And of course, 50 years ago, you didn't have the smorgasbord of workshops and different processes on offer that you do today. So I wasn't sort of tempted to look at any of those anyway, because they just weren't around. And then, as many of you know, it wasn't until I think I was around 40 or something that I discovered, introduced to clearing. And even then, it wasn't anything spiritual. It was very much an interesting way to earn a living. But a lot of the travel that I've had since has been in particularly Buddhist countries, although not always. Um, and I've been drawn to people, well, I was drawn to people who were on a bit of a self-awareness path, but no workshops, nothing that sort of led me in any particular direction. And even clearing was not, as I said, part of a spiritual sort of a journey. It was just a fascinating way to earn a living. And then, of course, what happened, of course, the more clearing I got into, the longer I was doing it, the clearer I became, which becomes really important. And with that clarity came greater understanding of the teachings of various people in the past, plus more modern day teachings from different people. And it all started to tie together. But still, I wasn't actually looking for anything. I wasn't searching, at least not consciously, but it was just showing up. My path was unfolding as a result, I believe, of the clearing, but even that's only a part of the reason, part of the journey. But what's become increasingly obvious is that when people are looking for answers, for direction, for someone to hold a light up the candle or whatever, it's generally because they're not content or at peace with who they are now and what they have now. And this has become really fundamental for me with a lot of people that I get, because they tell me all sorts of stories, all sorts of weird shit. You know, you may have heard it all yourself, you know, you may get involved and caught up in it yourself. But for me, the secret, I think, is ultimately there is no one looking. And so all the time we assume that we are inadequate, we are not equipped, we are needing this, we are needing that in order to be happy, to be safe, to grow, whatever. Then all we do is perpetuate a story or a drama that, you know, whatever we're looking for will make us happy. But I mean, it just doesn't work. This is not, in my experience anyway, this is not the answer. It's not the way. Because the searching soul can never be at rest, because the basic premise is that someone is looking for something that ultimately is not real, it's not there, it's just an imaginary goal that we believe will make us happy. Trying to be at peace in the moment, trying to be totally content with who you are in the here and now is possibly a big challenge, because so many people criticize themselves, they judge themselves, they blame themselves, they find themselves this or that or inadequate, or they're just so busy in life that they fail to take a moment to be still and quiet and to notice what is actually happening. And so for me, it's more of an attitude really of gratitude for what I do have. I have no need currently or desire for anything more than what we have at the present, what I've got at the moment. What I've got at the moment is absolutely just fine. I don't need more, don't need less. And so when we reach that stage, I think it generally means that we've exhausted in a lot of ways any karmic charge that we still carry. So when people are looking, searching, using different workshops, different whatever, to try and find out, get a bit more peace, a bit more this, a bit more that, because there's so many workshops at the moment about attracting more into your life. So there's this desire for more, there's this desperation for more, that we've never got enough. And all the time we have that attitude, we will never have enough. And so it's trying to let go of all of that, trying to work through the charge. Now, a lot of people judge and blame themselves for the situation that they're in, or they'll feel responsible for others, which ultimately they're not, of course. And so they're all the time in this mental conflict, and there can be no peace in that mental conflict. It's almost as though, because of our attachment to the past, our identification with how things have been in the past, that we're anchored into this third dimensional reality generally by fear, by insecurity, by anxiety, all low level, low frequency stuff. And all the time we are caught in that trap, we identify with that particular feeling or emotion, then the energy that we are cannot change. It gets stuck, and it's just in an eternal loop. And we try to make sense of that, we try to do something about it, but without recognizing the fundamental cause for the problem, and that is insecurity. And if we look at Buddhism just briefly, we can see that there is no security on this planet. There is no security in life. Everything is changing. Nothing is certain. And the moment we begin to accept that, any uncertainty or any judgment or concern about uncertainty just falls away, because it's not real. There's nothing there outside of our own imagination that's creating it. And we go through this over and over again with people, you know. when people start to think of a particular state of being, then if we can get them to notice physiology, how the body changes according to your thought. And so when we can change our thoughts, we change physiology. If we keep practicing that, then we'll change the energy that we transmit, that we radiate, most of which is on a subconscious level, of course. When we change that, we're no longer going to meet it on the road. We go over this in workshops, of course, when we look at the hologram or the holoverse, where we look at what we put out, we get back. But a lot of what we put out, of course, is still coming from the shadow, it's still from the subconscious. And that is something that we're not at peace with, we're not comfortable with. So we try to change it. So we're caught in an endless battle, taking something, a feeling, a thought, an emotion, to be real. When in actual fact, there's nothing real about it. It's the only reality it has is what we continue to give it. So better than looking all of the time for answers outside of the self, going to all these different workshops, spending all this money, following all these sort of interesting characters who talk all sorts of stuff. The only people you're actually helping are the people who are running the show, the people that you go and listen to all the time, not making any difference to you. If it made a difference, if it made a positive difference, then I wouldn't be meeting you. You wouldn't come and see me. I tend to be a last resort for most people. They've tried everything, now they're desperate and they come and try me. Or this path anyway, not necessarily me, but I'm just a representative of a different way of being. But I was talking to someone the other day who's been there, done that, and just about everything you can imagine she tried. And she said, she couldn't believe how simple this work is. And not only simple, but it goes against everything that she's been taught for 40, 50 years. And it undermines everything. When you understand this, all of that doesn't matter what you're still giving energy to, what you still think is real. It just collapses when you stop feeding it. And you can do this for yourselves, it's very easy to do. As soon as you notice a situation arising in the body, physiology, emotion, whatever, then you change your mind. You deliberately do something to change your focus. And if it's just getting up and going for a walk outside, making a cup of tea or coffee, going and beating the neighbor up, whatever, do something to change your focus. And your physiology will change. If you keep practicing that, your reality will change. But of course, if you keep thinking the same old story, if you're still desperately looking for some answers, then that's not going to change your story. That's just reinforcing the story that something out there is going to actually make you happy. But that's not going to work. It doesn't happen like that. Stop looking, stop searching, stop wasting your time. I think this is, I'm going to talk a bit more about this in our Buddhist class tomorrow, but all of this doing all the time, we're obsessed with doing. We've got to do something all the time to try to create something other than what we have. And I think the Buddha, I just sort of reflected on this, it was sort of 3 or 4 o'clock this morning. I think the Buddha went through much the same thing, In his early years, he was the prince in the palace and he had everything laid on, He was very wealthy, respected, or whatever. But then when he gave all of that up, he went to another extreme. He went to the extreme of poverty, of the life of an ascetic. He didn't own anything, didn't own any clothes, didn't wash, didn't shave, didn't worry about eating. It's a total mess, He went to one extreme, doing, trying to find the answers that he was looking for. And I don't even believe at that stage he knew what he was looking for. And none of us do. If you knew what you were looking for, then you will have found it. And so you're just sort of groping around in the dark, like you've got this brown paper bag on your head, don't know which way's up or anything, and you're trying to make sense of a situation that has no sense. So then, of course, according to the story in Siddhartha in Hermann Hesse's novel, then after he lived the life of the ascetic, he went back to a more affluent life of a courtesan, and he sort of hung around and got rich. He was a merchant, he made lots of money, whatever. But there still wasn't the answer there. So eventually, when his charge, when his karma had been exhausted, and you can't do it before, you might like to, you might think you're ready, but if you're still looking, if you're still searching, if you're still reaching out and grabbing hold of stuff, thoughts, feelings, emotions, then you're not ready. That has to be exhausted. And for the Buddha, it was exhausted. Well, Gautama, he wasn't the Buddha then. As he just says, I've had enough of this. This is ridiculous. I'm not getting anywhere. Nothing is proving or nothing is giving me the answers I was thought I was looking for. So he just sat down under his tree and vowed not to move. He'd stay in meditation until he woke up, which he did, of course. So stop looking, and the answer is there in front of you all of the time. But you can't see it because you're looking. You're looking in the wrong direction. You're looking for answers outside of the self. And so that, for me, this is why clearing has been so beneficial, because I wasn't looking. It just happened as a result of the practice of clearing, which is basically acceptance, developing the ability to accept what is, not thinking about what it should be, not judging, not blaming what it is, just accepting what it is, whatever shows up. And that's what clearing does. And then, of course, that's a very Buddhist path as well. Practice of acceptance is fundamental to the Buddhist teachings. Although at the time, I didn't realize that. It only became obvious in more recent years that that was exactly what was going on. So not looking, just practicing being, just noticing what's going on in the moment, and stop beating yourself up for being human. Stop beating yourself up for having what you might consider faults, like my upbringing, and we've all had sort of weird shit upbringings, it doesn't matter what you say or what you think, being born on this planet's bad enough. And then you're conditioned to believe all sorts of bullshit stories. But my conditioning, because of the persecution that I went through as a young person, very tiny, young, very, very young, that created huge problems in social life later on. And then I'd get blamed for being inadequate, for being wrong, for being this and for being that. There was no understanding about my history. There's no, it didn't even come into the conversation. And so I was blamed for something that I was total victim to. What can you do? You can't sort of change just because people tell you should be doing this, should be doing that. And when they do tell you, when people do give you ideas or suggestions, they're still coming from their own insecurities. They don't know. They really can't be listening to anyone. I mean, really, if you think someone knows, then you go and follow them for a while and find out eventually that they know jack shit. I keep telling you not to believe a word I say. You find out for yourself. This is my story that I share. It may or may not resonate with you, although because of the people I get showing up tonight, it obviously must resonate with some of you, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But if you don't, if this doesn't make sense, then obviously you go somewhere else. And people do. I once heard Deepak Chopra say that, only 5% of people who came to his workshops continued and followed through with his stuff. Everybody else went looking for something else. And this search is endless. These sort of workshop junkies, these butterflies that keep going from one thing to another. It doesn't work. It's not where it's at. Take a moment. Reflect on what you're feeling right now, what you have right now. Look around you. You've all got a roof over your head. As far as I can tell. You've all got clothes. Well, I can see that. You've all got probably food in your stomach. If not now, you're going to get some later on. You've all got, to some degree, disposable income. Look at what you have. Be grateful for the here and now with what you have in the here and now. Nothing more. Don't reach out. It will still come to you. You'll still get stuff. In my experience, the quicker you lose it, the quicker it comes back.